The day I became an intergalactic diplomat started like any other Tuesday at the research station. I was hunched over my keyboard, squinting at data streams from our deep space sensors, when the alarms blared. Not the usual, someone burned popcorn in the microwave again alarm, but the piercing wail of the unknown object approaching Earth at impossible speeds, variety. In my 5 years at the United Nations Space Observation Facility, I'd never heard that particular sound outside of drills. "Taylor, get to the command center." Dr. Chen's voice crackled through my comm unit. I abandoned my half-eaten sandwich and sprinted down the corridor, my heart hammering against my ribs. The command center was chaos when I arrived. Screens displayed a massive vessel, unlike anything in our database, decelerating as it approached Earth's orbit. It was shaped like an elongated teardrop, its surface shimmering with an iridescent material that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. The craft dwarfed our largest space stations by a factor of at least 20. "It's broadcasting something," announced Riley, our communications specialist, fingers flying across her console. "Not radio, it's some kind of quantum entanglement signal. But somehow our systems are translating it." A message appeared on the main screen. "Peaceful contact requested. Send single representative." Dr. Chen turned to me with that look, the one that meant I wouldn't like what came next. "Taylor, you're up." "Me?" I squeaked. "Why not you? Or General Hammond? Or literally anyone with diplomatic training?" "Because you wrote your thesis on theoretical alien communication protocols. You're the only one here who's even considered how this might work." Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Besides, your empathy scores are off the charts. If anyone can make first contact without starting an interstellar war, it's you." That's how, 6 hours later, I found myself aboard a military shuttle, approaching the massive alien vessel with nothing but my wits and a hastily assembled first contact kit. My palms were sweaty inside the spacesuit gloves as our craft was guided into what appeared to be a docking bay. The bay pressurized with an atmosphere that, miraculously, our sensors indicated was breathable. Following protocol, I kept my helmet on until a series of lights along the wall pulsed in what seemed like a beckoning pattern. "I'm exiting the shuttle now," I reported back to Mission Control. "Wish me luck." The moment I stepped into the alien corridor, gravity shifted subtly, lighter than Earth's but not by much. The walls glowed with an internal light that cast no shadows. As I moved forward, the corridor widened into a vast chamber that defied human architecture, curves and angles that somehow existed simultaneously, creating spaces that felt both intimate and infinite. And there she was at least. I presumed the being before me was female, though applying human gender concepts to an alien species was probably naive. She towered at least 9 feet tall, with a slender body covered in what looked like overlapping plates of opalescent chitin. 4 arms emerged from her torso, each ending in 7-fingered hands with articulation that would make a concert pianist jealous. Her head was crowned with what resembled a living diadem of writhing tendrils that changed color as I watched, shifting from deep purple to electric blue. But it was her eyes that transfixed me, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle on her face, pupilless and golden like pools of liquid amber. "Greetings, human representative," she spoke, her voice somehow bypassing my ears and materializing directly in my mind. "I am Zelthorix, Queen Regent of the Luminous Confluence." I managed a wobbly bow. "I'm Taylor Jensen, representing Earth. We welcome peaceful contact." The alien queen's head tilted at an angle that seemed impossible for her neck structure. "How fortunate that your species possesses suitable appendages. My royal carapace has developed an irritation that our medical drones cannot reach." She turned, revealing an area between her shoulder blades where the plates seemed duller, flaking slightly. "Would you provide assistance with a back scrub?" I stood frozen, my mind racing through diplomatic protocols and first contact scenarios. Nothing in my training had prepared me for this request. The fate of humanity potentially hanging on how well I could scratch between an alien monarch's shoulder blades. "I hate them." My voice failed as one of the queen's tendrils extended toward me, offering what appeared to be some kind of curved implement made of a material I couldn't identify. Is this not how your species establishes trust? She asked, those golden eyes blinking in sequence rather than unison. Physical grooming as social bonding? And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a back scrub. This was a test. The first of many challenges that would determine humanity's place among the stars. I cleared my throat, acutely aware that every word, every gesture I made was being scrutinized not just by the alien queen but likely by her entire species. Back at Mission Control, they were probably having collective heart attacks watching this unfold. In some of our cultures, yes, I answered carefully, accepting the tool. It felt warm in my hand, vibrating subtly like it contained some kind of energy. Grooming can be an act of trust and community. The queen's tendrils rippled in what I hoped was approval. Then you understand. The luminous confluence values actions over declarations. Words can deceive. Genuine care cannot be falsified. My hands trembled slightly as I approached her back. Up close, I could see that what I'd taken for an irritation was actually more complex. Small symbols seemed to be emerging from beneath the outer layer of her carapace, like living hieroglyphics pushing through to the surface. Is this normal for your kind? I asked, gently applying the tool, which emitted a soft blue glow when it contacted her plates. It is the memory molt, she explained, her voice in my mind taking on a warmer tone. Every third cycle, our histories are recorded physically upon our bodies. The royal lineage carries the most significant records of our species. What you assist with now is the uncovering of knowledge that predates even my great-grandmother's emergence. As I carefully worked the tool across her back, flakes of the outer carapace fell away, revealing intricate patterns beneath, swirling galaxies, mathematical equations, and what looked like historical scenes playing out in miniature, shimmering movements. It's beautiful, I whispered, genuinely awed. These particular memories, the queen continued, concern our last contact with humans. Approximately 300 of your Earth years ago. My hand froze mid-scrape. What? That's impossible. We've never. Your historical records are incomplete, she stated matter-of-factly. The encounter was with a small vessel in what you call the Bermuda Triangle. Most unfortunate. Our exploratory craft's dimensional drive malfunctioned, creating what you might understand as a temporary R. The human vessel was drawn through. We returned them, of course, but the chronological alignment was imprecise. My mind reeled with implications. The missing ships, the mysterious reappearances years later with crews that hadn't aged, stories dismissed as maritime legends suddenly took on new meaning. This is why we've come now, the queen explained. Our scientists have detected another dimensional instability growing in that same region. If left unchecked, it could create a permanent rift between our realities. Neither of our worlds would survive the resulting dimensional collapse. No pressure. First day as a representative of humanity, and I'm dealing with potential multidimensional apocalypse. At least it explained why they'd chosen now to make contact. That I continued working, revealing more of the intricate memories beneath her carapace. One scene showed human figures aboard what looked like an ancient sailing vessel, interacting with beings similar to the queen but smaller, perhaps not royalty. They were afraid at first, as you are, she observed. I'm not. I started to protest, then caught myself. Oh yes. I'm terrified, but also fascinated. Her tendrils changed to a warm orange color. Honesty. The humans before reacted similarly. Once their fear subsided, we learned much from each other. Their ship's captain showed remarkable adaptability. He taught our explorers games from your world, and in return, they shared star navigation techniques. When we returned them to Earth, their vessel had been repaired and improved. And that's why some sailors reported their ships suddenly sailing faster or navigating better after mysterious disappearances, I murmured, pieces falling into place. Perhaps, though the improvement was primarily to help them survive the return journey. Your oceans are surprisingly volatile. I'd nearly finished with her back now, the revealed patterns glowing with their own inner light. The hieroglyphics seemed to move and shift as if alive, telling stories I could almost but not quite comprehend. What happens now? I asked, Stepping back to admire my work, the queen turned, her 3 eyes studying me with an intensity that made me feel transparent. Now we negotiate. The dimensional rift requires attention from both our species. We possess the theoretical knowledge, but the physical location exists in your world. We will need a team of humans to work alongside our dimensional engineers. I'll need to consult with my superiors, I said, trying to sound more diplomatic than overwhelmed. Of course. Her tendrils now rippled with multiple colors simultaneously. But first, there is the matter of reciprocity. I blinked in confusion. Reciprocity? You have assisted me with the memory molt. Now I must offer something of equal value. She gestured with her upper right arm, and a portion of the chamber wall dissolved, revealing what looked like a garden of crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. Would you care to see what became of the humans who never returned to Earth? My heart nearly stopped. They're here? Still alive. The queen's head tilted in that impossible angle again. Alive is a limited concept. But yes, in a manner. Their stories continue. Would you like to meet them before we discuss the fate of our worlds? I followed Queen Zelthorix through the dissolving wall, my heart pounding in my chest. The crystalline garden stretched before us, vast and impossible, with structures that seemed to grow rather than stand, pulsing with internal light that shifted through colors I couldn't even name. Some reached toward the distant ceiling like trees, while others spread low across the floor like luminous coral reefs. Do not be alarmed by what you see, the queen cautioned, her mental voice gentle. The transition is initially unsettling for your kind. Before I could ask what transition she meant, we approached a cluster of crystals that glowed with a warm amber light. Within one, I saw movement, and then nearly stumbled backward in shock. The human face looked out at me from inside the crystal. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with a weathered face and a full beard. He wore what looked like an 18th-century naval uniform, and his eyes, fully alert and aware, widened at the sight of me. Another visitor from Earth. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing my ears just as the Queen's did. Captain James Fletcher, the Queen introduced him. His vessel, the Meridian, encountered our exploratory craft in the year 1742. That's nearly 300 years ago, I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from his face. The captain smiled. Time passes differently here, young one. What feels like decades to me might be centuries to Earth. I've watched empires rise and fall through the viewing crystals. Tell me, does the United States still stand? It does, I managed, still trying to process what I was seeing. Splendid. I had placed a substantial wager with Dr. Nguyen on that matter. He gestured to another crystal nearby, where a woman in what looked like 1950s clothing nodded in acknowledgement. What happened to you? I asked, finding my voice again. A choice, Captain Fletcher replied simply. When the Queen's ancestors offered to return us to Earth, some of my crew accepted. Others, myself included, were curious about the cosmos. They offered us a place among them, a chance to explore the universe through the luminous confluence. His expression grew wistful. My physical form eventually aged, of course, but before death could claim me, they offered preservation in the memory crystal. My consciousness lives on, able to experience the wonders of multiple dimensions. I looked around and realized there were dozens of crystals housing human consciousnesses, men and women from different eras who had made the same choice. They aren't prisoners, the Queen clarified, sensing my unease. Each crystal is a gateway to experiences beyond physical limitation. They remain here by choice and can communicate with one another. Some have even joined our exploration vessels as guides and advisors. It's a good life, added a woman's voice from a nearby crystal. Her appearance suggested early 21st century. I was a physicist who disappeared during a research expedition in 2018. Here, I've helped develop cross-dimensional technology that allows me to experience multiple realities simultaneously. It's everything I theorized about but could never prove on Earth. The implications were staggering. All those missing persons cases, all those mysterious disappearances, some had simply chosen a different path, a different form of existence. This is why we've always returned when possible, the Queen explained. We do not take without offering choice. Those who wished to return to Earth were returned, though the temporal alignment was not always precise. And now you're offering me the same choice? I asked cautiously. The Queen's tendrils rippled in what I now recognized as amusement. Not yet. First, we have a dimensional rift to repair. Your role is as diplomat and interpreter, not as wreck. Brut. She guided me away from the crystal garden and through another shifting doorway into what appeared to be a command center. Three-dimensional holographic displays showed Earth from various angles, with a pulsing red area over the Atlantic Ocean. The rift grows, she said, her tone more urgent. We must act within 72 of your hours, or containment will become impossible. What do you need from us, from Earth? I asked. Access, she replied. We can provide the technology to seal the rift, but it must be deployed from both sides simultaneously. We need permission to position our engineers at these coordinates. She gestured, and 7 locations lit up on the global map, all forming a pattern around the Bermuda Triangle that I frowned. These are all heavily populated areas or military installations. Getting clearance won't be easy, especially on such short notice. Then we must be persuasive. The Queen turned to me fully. Taylor Jensen, I am elevating your status. You are no longer merely a representative but an ambassador of Earth. I will send you back with evidence and data that should convince your leaders of the threat. And if they don't believe me? The weight of responsibility settled heavy on my shoulders. The Queen's eyes dimmed slightly. Then I must explore alternatives that are less cooperative. A chill ran down my spine. Are you threatening Earth? No, she said firmly. I am stating reality. If the rift cannot be sealed properly from both sides, we will be forced to collapse it artificially. Such an action would cause significant, though not catastrophic, damage to the surrounding region. Millions would be displaced. Some would perish. We wish to avoid this outcome. I swallowed hard. I'll need to return immediately and with all the evidence you can provide. Of course. She gestured, and one of the smaller aliens approached, carrying what looked like a crystal similar to those in the garden, but smaller and unoccupied. This contains all the necessary data compatible with your technology. It also serves as a direct communication link to me. As I accepted the crystal, the ship suddenly trembled. Alarm symbols flashed across the holographic displays. What's happening? I asked, steadying myself against a wall that felt strangely alive beneath my touch. The Queen's tendrils flared red. The rift is destabilizing more rapidly than predicted. We have less time than we thought. She turned to her crew, issuing commands in a series of clicks and whistles too rapid for me to follow. The trembling intensified. Portions of the ceiling began to shift and flow like liquid metal. We must move you to safety, the Queen said, suddenly taking my arm with one of her lower hands. Her touch was surprisingly warm. The dimensional fluctuations are affecting our ship's integrity. As she guided me through corridors that seemed to be rearranging themselves, I glimpsed through viewports what looked like tears in the fabric of space itself, jagged lines of nothingness cutting across the stars. This is just the beginning, she warned as we reached what appeared to be an escape pod. If the rift fully opens, such tears will appear across your planet's surface. Entire cities could be swallowed into the void. Another violent shudder rocked the ship. I heard structural groans and the sound of something massive giving way in the distance. Queen Zelthorix. A frantic call came from behind us. One of her crew members rushed forward, 3 of its arms cradling a damaged control panel. The primary dimensional stabilizers are failing. We cannot maintain our position. The Queen's eyes locked with mine, and for the first time, I saw fear in those golden orbs. Taylor Jensen of Earth, we are out of time. You must make a choice now that will determine the fate of both our worlds. She pressed something into my hand, a device unlike anything I'd ever seen, covered in the same living hieroglyphics that had been revealed on her back. This is our most precious technology. The dimensional anchor. It can seal the rift permanently, but it must be activated at the exact epicenter. Her mental voice grew urgent. Our ship can no longer reach the coordinates. We are being pulled back into our dimension. Another violent tremor, stronger than before. Warning lights bathed the corridor in crimson. What are you asking me to do? I demanded, clutching the device as the ship lurched again. Take the escape pod to Earth. Bring the anchor to these coordinates. A series of numbers and images flashed directly into my mind. You will have approximately 6 hours after we depart. And if I fail? The Queen's tendrils coiled tightly against her head. Then 2 worlds end, Ambassador Jensen. Starting with yours. The escape pod shot toward Earth like a meteor, its hull glowing red-hot as we tore through the atmosphere. I white-knuckled the safety harness. The dimensional anchor clutched against my chest. Through the view screen, I watched the alien mothership flicker and distort before vanishing entirely, pulled back into its home dimension. Warning! Anomalous energy signatures detected, announced an automated voice in perfect English. Trajectory adjustment required. The pod banked sharply left, nearly throwing me against the wall despite the harness. Outside, the sky had turned an unnatural purple, with lightning-like cracks spreading across it. The dimensional rift was already affecting Earth's atmosphere. Display current trajectory and landing coordinates, I commanded, hoping the pod's AI would understand. A holographic map materialized, showing the eastern seaboard of the United States. Our projected landing point blinked red, 50 miles offshore from the Florida Keys. Not ideal, but at least I wouldn't be splashing down in the middle of the Atlantic. The pod shuddered violently as we dropped lower. Warning symbols flashed across the displays, symbols I couldn't read but whose urgent red coloring needed no translation. Unexpected gravitational anomaly detected, the AI announced with the same calm tone one might use to comment on slightly cloudy weather. Emergency protocols engaged. The pod's descent suddenly accelerated. My stomach lurched as we plummeted at what felt like twice the previous speed. Trees and coastline rushed up to meet us. This was going to be rough. Impact came with a sound like a thunderclap. My head snapped forward then back, the harness cutting into my shoulders. For a moment, everything went dark. When I came to, smoke filled the pod. The door had been automatically jettisoned, letting in humid Florida air. I unbuckled with shaking hands, still clutching the dimensional anchor. According to the Queen, I had 6 hours to reach the rift's epicenter, wherever that was. I stumbled out onto sandy soil. Wheat crashed in what looked like a nature preserve, palmettos and slash pines surrounding the smoking crater. In the distance, I could hear sirens. Of course, a flaming object falling from the sky wouldn't exactly go unnoticed. I checked my watch. It had been less than an hour since I'd left the alien ship. 5 hours remaining. My comm unit crackled to life. Eeler? Taylor, do you read? Dr. Chen's voice, frantic with worry. I'm here, I croaked, my throat raw from the smoke. I'm back on Earth. Thank God. Your signal disappeared, then reappeared, entering atmosphere at impossible speeds. What happened up there? Where's the alien ship? Gone. Pulled back to their dimension. I took a deep breath. Listen carefully. We have a serious situation. There's a dimensional rift forming in the Bermuda Triangle. If we don't seal it in the next 5 hours, we're looking at catastrophic damage. Millions of lives at risk. A long pause. How do you know this? The aliens showed me. They gave me technology to seal it. I glanced down at the dimensional anchor, its hieroglyphics pulsing faintly. I need transport to these coordinates immediately. I rattled off the location the Queen had implanted in my mind. Another pause, longer this time. When Dr. Chen spoke again, her voice had changed. Taylor, I need you to stay where you are. We're sending a recovery team. Something in her tone made me uneasy. Did you hear what I said? We don't have time for debriefings. The rift is expanding exponentially. We understand. But we need to verify this information before proceeding. The military has been tracking unusual energy signatures in that region for the past 12 hours. They're handling the situation. A chill ran down my spine. What does that mean, handling it? Just stay where you are, Taylor. That's an order. The comm went dead. In the distance, the sirens grew louder. I had a sinking feeling in my gut. If the military was already involved, they might mistake the dimensional anomalies for some kind of attack. What would they do? Launch missiles at a tear in the fabric of reality? I had to move. Now that I pocketed the comm unit and headed south, using the position of the setting sun to orient myself. The dimensional anchor felt warm against my side, its pulsing growing more frequent. Was it responding to the proximity of the rift? After a half hour of pushing through dense vegetation, I emerged onto a road. A faded sign read, Naval Air Station Key West 15 miles. Perfect. If I could reach the base, I might find someone willing to listen. Or at least transportation. As I walked, the sky grew increasingly strange. The sunset colors seemed wrong, too intense, with purple streaks that twisted unnaturally. Overhead, clouds spiraled in patterns that defied normal weather systems. A pickup truck appeared around the bend, slowing as it approached. The driver, an older man with sun-weathered skin, leaned out. "You all right, buddy? You look like you've been through hell." "I need to get to the naval base," I said, deciding honesty was my best approach. "It's an emergency." He eyed me skeptically. "You military? Government research? Please, it's urgent." Something in my expression must have convinced him. Up in. I was headed that way anyhow. As we drove, the radio cycled through emergency broadcasts. Unusual weather patterns, magnetic anomalies affecting navigation systems, spontaneous power outages across South Florida. "End times, if you ask me," the driver muttered, gesturing at the churning sky. "My granddaddy used to talk about signs like this." I checked my watch again. 4 hours remaining. We were halfway to the base when the truck's engine suddenly died. All the dashboard lights went out simultaneously. "What the?" The driver tried the ignition. Nothing. I looked around and noticed other vehicles stopped along the road. A helicopter hovered in the distance, then began spinning erratically before disappearing behind the treeline. The sound of its crash echoed seconds later. "It's starting," I murmured. "What's starting?" The driver's face had gone pale. Before I could answer, the air itself seemed to ripple. About 100 yards ahead, a vertical seam appeared, like a tear in fabric, showing nothing but absolute darkness beyond. It widened slowly, swallowing the road. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing the dimensional anchor and leaping from the truck. The driver followed, eyes wide with terror. We sprinted away from the expanding tier. Behind us, the truck groaned as it was pulled toward the void, metal twisting before it disappeared entirely. The tear continued to grow, consuming trees, road signs, everything in its path. My comm unit crackled to life again. "Taylor!" Dr. Chen's voice, now desperate. "Our satellites are picking up dozens of rifts opening across the region. What's happening?" "It's accelerating," I panted, still running. The Queen was wrong about the timeline. "We don't have hours, we have minutes." "The military is deploying, but they're losing aircraft as soon as they approach the phenomena," Dr. Chen replied. "Taylor, they're talking about a tactical nuclear strike to somehow cauterize the tear. That's insane. It could make everything worse." I stopped, catching my breath. "Listen to me. I have the technology to close it, but I need to reach the epicenter." "Even if I believed you, how would you get there? Nothing can fly in that airspace now." I looked down at the dimensional anchor, its hieroglyphics now glowing brightly. Something clicked in my mind, a memory of the Queen's back, the living history etched into her carapace. These weren't just random symbols, they were instructions. I think I need to activate this device now," I said slowly. "Not at the epicenter. The anchor doesn't need to be there physically. It creates a connection, a bridge." "Taylor, wait." I turned the device over in my hands, following the pattern of symbols. They seemed to flow and guide my fingers to specific points. As I pressed the final sequence, the anchor split open, revealing a core of swirling energy that looked like a miniature galaxy. A voice that wasn't quite sound filled my head, not the Queen's, but something older, deeper. "Human ambassador," it intoned. "The anchor requires a consciousness to guide it, a mind to navigate the dimensional currents." "What does that mean?" I whispered. To close the rift, a consciousness must be sacrificed to the void. Become one with it, to heal it. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a device. It was a vessel for consciousness transfer. Someone would have to give themselves to the rift to close it. In that moment, I understood why the Queen had been so eager to have a human representative. Why she had shown me the crystalline garden with its preserved human minds. It hadn't been diplomacy at all, that it had been an assessment. The sky tore open above me, the void expanding in all directions. Trees uprooted and flew upward. The driver who had helped me screamed as his feet left the ground, his body drawn toward the darkness. I lunged and caught his arm, anchoring him to a palm tree with my other hand. The pull was getting stronger by the second. My comm crackled one last time. Taylor, the president has authorized the strike. You have 5 minutes to clear the area. 5 minutes until nuclear weapons. Millions of lives at stake. And in my hands, a solution that demanded the ultimate sacrifice. The dimensional anchor pulsed in sync with my heartbeat now, waiting for my decision. Tim. He seemed to slow as I stood there, the dimensional anchor pulsing in my hands, the void growing above me. In the distance, I heard fighter jets, no doubt carrying their deadly payload. The driver-eyed saved clung to the palm tree, his eyes wide with terror. What's happening? He shouted over the roar of the void that I looked into his eyes, an innocent bystander caught in a cosmic disaster. How many more like him would die if I failed? The Queen's final words echoed in my mind. 2 worlds end, Ambassador Jensen. Starting with yours. But now I understood the truth. The luminous confluence needed a human consciousness to seal the rift, to sacrifice themselves. All that talk of cooperation, the diplomatic gestures, even the back scrub that had started it all, they had been evaluating my suitability as a sacrifice that I should have felt betrayed, manipulated. But strangely I felt something else, understanding. If our situations were reversed, wouldn't we have done something similar to save Earth? A consciousness must be sacrificed. The voice from the anchor repeated that. I took a deep breath. The decision seemed clear. Then take mine, I said, holding the device higher. I offer myself. The anchor began to glow brighter, the miniature galaxy within it spinning faster. But then, a new voice spoke, not in my mind, but from within the anchor itself. That will not be necessary, Taylor Jensen. I nearly dropped the device in shock. The voice was the Queen's, but different, weaker, strained. What's happening? I demanded, confused. I have already made the sacrifice, she replied. When our ship was pulled back to our dimension, I transferred a portion of my consciousness into the anchor. My physical form is gone, but I remain here, split between worlds. I was stunned. But why? Why would you sacrifice yourself? Because I saw in your memories what I needed to know. You value your world as I value mine. You would sacrifice yourself for strangers as would I. This is the true test of compatibility between our species. Her voice grew fainter. And because the memory mold revealed to me that my ancestors were responsible for creating this dimensional weakness centuries ago. The debt is ours to pay. What do I need to do? I asked urgently, aware of the fighter jets growing closer. Place the anchor on the ground and step back. What remains of my consciousness will guide the energy. I did as she instructed, setting the device down. The moment it touched the earth, it began to sink into the ground like a stone into water, the soil rippling around it. Light burst upward in a column so bright I had to shield my eyes. The column spread at the top, forming a glowing umbrella that expanded outward, racing toward the edges of the rift. Wherever the light touched the void, the tear began to close, not violently but gently, like a wound healing in reverse. The MY-COM unit crackled one final time. Taylor, we're seeing something incredible on satellite. The rifts are closing. What did you do? It wasn't me, I answered, watching in awe as the sky began to return to normal. It was the alien queen. She sacrificed herself. The driver had collapsed onto the ground, staring upward as the unnatural purple faded back to the orange and pink of a normal sunset. Are we safe now? He asked. Before I could answer, The ground where the anchor had disappeared began to glow again. A small crystal emerged, similar to those I'd seen in the Queen's garden, but more compact, fitting in the palm of my hand when I picked it up. The rift is sealed. The Queen's voice came from the crystal, much clearer now. The nuclear strike has been aborted. Your world is safe. And you? I asked, cradling the crystal. What happens to you now? I exist in this form, as many of your kind do in our garden. A consciousness without a body, but not without purpose. There was a pause. I will need a guardian, Ambassador Jensen. Someone to protect this crystal and to serve as liaison between our worlds. I understood the implications immediately. You want me to stay with you, to be your connection to humanity. The luminous confluence still has much to share with Earth, and Earth with us. But we will do it properly this time. No secrets, no manipulations. True cooperation. I looked at the crystal in my hand, then at the world around me, the world I just helped save. A world that now knew beyond any doubt that we weren't alone in the universe. I accept, I said. But I have conditions. No more taking humans without full disclosure. No more temporal displacements. And we establish formal diplomatic relations, not just through me, but through our governments. Agreed. The crystal pulsed warmly in my hand. You are learning to negotiate like a true diplomat, Taylor Jensen. 3 months later, I stood in a specially constructed chamber at the United Nations. Representatives from every major world power sat in a semicircle before me. Behind me, on a pedestal of honor, rested the crystal containing what remained of Queen Zelthorix's consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, today marks the formal establishment of diplomatic relations between Earth and the luminous confluence. The technology they have offered will help us address climate change, disease, and energy shortages. In return, we will share our art, our literature, our music, the things that make us uniquely human. The chamber erupted in applause. Dr. Chen, now promoted to director of the newly formed Bureau of Extraterrestrial Affairs, gave me an encouraging nod. As the meeting concluded, I returned to my private quarters. I placed the Queen's crystal on its special stand beside my bed. They responded well, I said to her. Phase 1 of the exchange program is approved. We'll begin selecting candidates next month. Excellent, the Queen replied. And the other matter we discussed? Have you made your decision? I took a deep breath. This was the part no one else knew about yet, not even Dr. Chen. The luminous confluence had offered me something extraordinary, the same choice they had given to Captain Fletcher and the others. When my physical body eventually aged and died, they could preserve my consciousness in a crystal of my own. Practical immortality. The chance to witness centuries of human advancement. To see our species take its place among the stars. I'm still thinking about it, I answered honestly. It's a big decision. Of course. There is no rush. Decades of your time remain before you must choose. I lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. So much had changed in such a short time. From researcher to ambassador to potential immortal, all because an alien queen had asked for a back scrub. Thus I drifted towards sleep. The crystal glowed softly. I thought I was dreaming when I heard the Queen's voice one last time that night. You should know, she whispered, that the memory mold revealed one more thing, something I have not yet shared with your leaders. I sat up, suddenly alert. What is it? The dimensional rifts were not merely the result of ancient accidents. They were created deliberately as gateways. Gateways for what? I asked, a chill running down my spine. The crystal pulsed with an intensity one hadn't seen before. For those who come before us. The ancient ones who seeded both our worlds. They left markers in our DNA, in our collective memories. The rifts were meant to reopen when both our species reached a certain level of development. I swallowed hard. Are you saying we have the same creators? That humans and your species are related? More than related, Taylor Jensen. The memory mold contains images of Earth from before humans evolved. Your planet was a colony, an experiment abandoned millions of years ago when the ancient ones fled something they feared. Fled what? I whispered. That, the Queen replied, is what we must discover together. Because the sealing of the rift sent a signal, one that has been traveling outward across the cosmos since that day on the Florida coast. A signal to whom? The crystal dimmed slightly, as if the Queen were hesitating. To our creators. We have announced that their children have grown up. And if my interpretation of the memory molt is correct, they are already on their way back. I stared at the crystal in the darkness, my mind reeling with implications. First contact hadn't been first contact at all. It had been a family reunion, and now the parents were coming home. The real first contact was yet to come that I couldn't sleep after the Queen's revelation. I paced my quarters until dawn, watching the sun rise over the New York skyline, the crystal glowing softly on its stand. When will they arrive? I finally asked. Based on the ancient records in the memory molt, not for decades, perhaps a century, the Queen replied. Space is vast, and even they cannot break its fundamental laws. But they are coming. And we have no idea if they're friendly. They created both our species, she said. But parents are not always kind to their children, especially those who have grown beyond their original design. In the weeks that followed, I debated whether to share this information with Earth's governments. Dr. Chen noticed my distraction during meetings, cornering me after a particularly tense negotiation with the Russian delegation. Something's eating at you, she said as we walked through the gardens. And I'm guessing it's more than just diplomatic stress. I looked at the people around us, diplomats, tourists, security personnel, all going about their lives, blissfully unaware of what might be coming. Did they deserve to know? Or would it only cause panic for a threat that might not materialize for generations? Some truths, I said carefully, need the right moment. Dr. Chen studied my face. The Queen told you something else, didn't she? I nodded slightly. Is Earth in immediate danger? No, I answered truthfully. Not immediate. She seemed to accept this, at least for now. When you're ready to share it, I'll be here. 6 months into my role as ambassador, we established the first official human confluence exchange program. 20 volunteers, scientists, artists, linguists, prepared to visit a newly constructed confluence outpost orbiting Jupiter. In return, 15 confluence representatives would come to Earth, housed in specially designed environmental habitats. The night before the first exchange ships launched, Captain Fletcher contacted me through the Crystal Network, his consciousness reaching out from the Queen's garden. Nervous about tomorrow? He asked, his voice warm in my mind. Terrified, I admitted. What if something goes wrong? What if humans and the confluence can't get along outside of controlled diplomatic settings? There's so much potential for misunderstanding. The captain's mental laughter surprised me. You remind me of myself before my first Atlantic crossing. So certain the unknown meant disaster. And did it? Oh, we hit the worst storm in a generation. Lost the mainmast, nearly sank twice. 3 men washed overboard. He paused. But we made it through. And what we discovered changed everything. New trade routes, new foods, new ideas. That's not exactly reassuring, I pointed out. It wasn't meant to be. Exploration isn't about comfort, lad. It's about pushing boundaries despite the risks. His presence in my mind shifted, showing me memories of his own journeys, both on Earth's oceans and later among the stars with the confluence. Some things are worth the danger. The exchange program succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. Human artists collaborated with confluence engineers to create impossible sculptures that changed with the viewer's thoughts. Confluence historians worked with human archaeologists to uncover lost civilizations. Medical knowledge advanced by decades as our different approaches to biology merged. A year passed, then 2. I split my time between Earth and various confluence vessels, the Queen's crystal always with me. We expanded diplomatic relations to include trade agreements, scientific partnerships, even cultural exchanges broadcast globally. Children on Earth grew up learning about the confluence in school, just as young confluence members learned human languages and customs. On the third anniversary of first contact, I found myself back in the same control room where it had all begun, the UN Space Observation Facility where I'd first heard the alarm that changed everything. Dr. Chen had organized a small celebration, gathering the original team that had witnessed my departure to the alien ship. To think, Riley said, raising her glass, it all started with a back scrub. Everyone laughed, including me. The Queen's crystal pulsed with amusement on its chain around my neck. I'd taken to wearing it as a pendant, finding it easier than constantly setting up stands. Not quite how diplomatic relations usually begin, Dr. Chen agreed. But effective. Later, as the party wound down, I stepped outside to look at the stars. The night was clear, the Milky Way stretching across the sky like spilled silver. They're out there, the Queen said softly. Watching, perhaps. Waiting. Let them come, I replied, surprising myself with my confidence. We'll be ready. And I realized I believed it. In 3 short years, humanity had adapted to the existence of the confluence, had begun integrating their knowledge, their perspective into our own. We were stronger for it, more united, more focused on our common future than our divided past. Whatever ancient beings had created us and then abandoned us, they would not find the same primitive species they had left behind. They would find 2 civilizations that had found each other against astronomical odds, that had overcome their differences to forge something new. The Queen's consciousness stirred against my thoughts. You've changed, Taylor Jensen. The researcher I first met would never have spoken with such certainty. The researcher you met thought he was alone in the universe, I replied. Now I know better. I touched the crystal gently, feeling its warmth against my palm. So much had happened because I'd helped an alien queen with a simple request. A back scrub that had led to saved worlds, new alliances, and the promise of a future I could never have imagined. As I watched a shooting star trace its path across the heavens, I wondered what our creators would think when they arrived. Would they be proud of what their experiments had become? Or threatened by it? Either way, we would face them together, humanity and the luminous confluence, no longer separate species but partners in whatever came next. I smiled up at the stars, no longer feeling small beneath their vastness. The universe had just gotten a whole lot more interesting, and it had all started when I stood frozen as an alien queen asked for a back scrub.